When the doctor in a white coat in one of the clinics in Detroit stopped flipping through my file and simply looked me in the eyes, a silence fell over the office that you could only hear in a snow-covered forest in Michigan in January. He said nothing comforting. He simply named a term that shrinks your future down to the size of a postage stamp. And in that very second, while he was choosing his words about palliative care, I felt a strange, almost shocking relief. That huge, heavy backpack filled with plans, ambitions, and social obligations that I had been carrying for 82 years simply crumbled into dust. It turns out a medical verdict is not only about the end, it is about an incredible, piercing ability to see the truth without embellishment. I suddenly realized that most of my efforts after 50 were not just misguided. They were an absolutely senseless, expensive waste of time that I had been buying at the cost of my own life. I am 82. For 56 years I built a career, raised children, and tried to meet the standards of our American Midwest. To be reliable, successful, always right. I went from a junior specialist to a man whose word in the professional circles of Michigan was considered law. But now, standing on the threshold where your experience weighs less than an empty pill bottle, I have the moral right to say what you are unlikely to want to hear while you are still in the game. There are things we consider sacred duties after 50, but in reality, they are just rust eating away at our last golden years. I see this pattern everywhere. Elderly people in our state and across the country spend the remainder of their strength on things that will bring them neither peace nor joy. The tension in my chest now is not from fear of death, but from how many people keep running in circles, not even suspecting that they have long since lost the main prize. I want to tell you about 5 traps we fall into when we think we still have time, while in reality we have long been spending someone else's. Looking at the snow-covered streets through the window of my office, I see thousands of people performing the same ritual of self-destruction every day. The first and most senseless waste of time I have only now realized is the endless struggle to prove that you are right. God, how many hours I killed in arguments at family dinners or in office corridors, trying to prove my intellectual superiority. I remember once in Grand Rapids I fell out with an old friend over some minor detail in tax legislation. We did not speak for 3 years. 3 years of life exchanged for the dry satisfaction of being right. Now that my time is measured not in years, but in months, I absolutely do not care whose theory was correct. Being right is the cheapest drug for the ego, which after 50 becomes pure poison. We spend priceless evenings proving our importance instead of simply enjoying the warmth of the person across from us. The second mistake, which now seems almost criminal to me, is the pursuit of approval from others. In our Michigan, it has always mattered what the neighbors say, what car you park by the entrance, and whether your position is prestigious enough. I have seen men in their 60s take out loans for new pickups just so they would not look worse than their colleagues. We are used to buying things we do not need to impress people we do not even like. It is a mentality that holds us captive for decades. Now, when I put on my old worn sweater, I do not care what the young bank clerk thinks of it. I do it for myself, for my comfort, for my soul. Trying to maintain the facade of a successful person after 50 is like painting the fence of a house that termites are already eating from the inside. The third pattern I observe with pain is our desire to be teachers to our children and grandchildren. For some reason, we decided that our experience is the ultimate truth. For years, I pointed out my son's mistakes in business, corrected his decisions, lectured him on how to raise my grandchildren. I thought I was saving him from pain, but in reality, I was only stealing from him the right to his own life. The slow consequence of such behavior is a wall of alienation that we build with our own hands. When you constantly press with your authority, you do not become wiser in their eyes. You simply become boring and dangerous. Now, I am learning to stay silent. I see them make mistakes, and I simply stand nearby, ready to support rather than judge. It gives far more closeness than any correct advice. The fourth thing that sucks the life out of us is excessive saving and hoarding for a rainy day. In this region, we are used to putting aside every cent, denying ourselves trips, good food, bright impressions. All my life I saved money in accounts, watching the numbers grow, while my life remained gray. I waited for a better moment to see the ocean or simply spend a weekend in a good hotel. And now I have this money, but I cannot exchange it for a single minute of breathing without shortness of breath, nor for the strength in my legs to walk on the sand. Those papers in the bank do not warm you when your body is failing. We trade joy for security, which turns out to be an illusion. And the fifth is fear of change and new beginnings after a certain age. Many of my peers say, "It's too late for me to learn something new," or "I'm too old for a hobby." This is voluntary imprisonment in a waiting room for death. They sit in front of televisions discussing politics or illnesses, and their brains simply atrophy from boredom. The social system suggests that after 60, we should simply live out our days. This is a big lie we buy into, losing the last sparks of curiosity about this incredible world. We become a shadow of ourselves even before our heart makes its final beat. You know, the greatest irony of my life is that I understood these truths not through clever books, but through an empty chair across from me. My wife, Ellen, passed away 6 years ago. She was an elementary school teacher in Lansing, a woman who could see sunbeams where I saw only dust on the furniture. Throughout our entire shared path after 50, I spent my time trying to provide us stability. I worked overtime. I argued with her over every $100 spent on what I called nonsense. Trips to the ocean, new bright curtains, or dinners in restaurants that served something more complicated than steak and potatoes. I always said, "Ellen, wait. Once we retire, save enough, close all the accounts, then we'll start living to the fullest." I remember our last big conflict, which still burns in my chest stronger than any diagnosis. She wanted to go to Maine just to see the lighthouses in the fall. She dreamed of that cold sea and the smell of salt. And I spent a week proving to her that it was not the right time, that inflation was eating up savings, that we urgently needed to redo the roof on our house in Ann Arbor, because the shingles were no longer the same. I won that argument. I was right. I was the rational man who cares about his family, and 2 months later, she was gone. A sudden stroke right in the kitchen while she was making me coffee. We redid the roof. It is perfect, but beneath it settled such a silence that it makes you want to scream. Now I sit in this big, expensive house, and every corner reminds me of how I stole from her and from myself minutes of happiness for the sake of illusory security. I exchanged her laughter for a new roof that I now do not need even for free. I see this contrast every Sunday when I step onto the porch. My neighbor, Harry, who is 10 years younger than me, makes the same mistake with manic precision. He yells at his son because the boy does not want to go to law school but wants to pursue music or photography. Harry is red-faced, trying to save the boy with his life experience, proving to him that you cannot earn a living with music. And I look at them through the mesh of my porch and see myself, just as confident in my infallibility. I want to walk up, grab him by the shoulders and rasp out, "Harry, be quiet. Just go to a concert with him. In 20 years you will not care what diploma hangs in his office, but you will painfully miss his simple, 'Dad, hi,' if you destroy that bridge now." But I remain silent because I know he will not hear. He is still in the game. He still thinks that control over others is a form of love. Or take my sister, Martha. All her life she saved every penny for a rainy day. She denied herself new shoes, quality medical care, small joys. "It's for old age," she said, and now old age has come, and with it illnesses that cannot be cured for any money. Now she has an amount in her account that would be enough for a trip around the world, but she cannot even leave her room without help. The money that was supposed to become her freedom has turned into just a number in a banking app that she looks at with bitterness. She never managed to exchange those papers for emotions, for memories, for something that would warm her now during these long Michigan winters. There is this strange, heavy sense of time here in the Midwest. We were raised in a culture of hard labor, where rest is considered a sin and changing your mind is a weakness of character. My generation grew up in the factories of Detroit and on farms around the Great Lakes. We are used to enduring and waiting. But now, watching the sunset, I see that this endurance was often just refined cowardice before real life. The few of my acquaintances who managed to let go of the reins in time, who allowed themselves to be imperfect, ridiculous, who spent money on travel rather than status, now look more alive than I do. They tell stories about getting lost in Rome or getting soaked in the rain in Paris, and I can only tell how profitably I reinvested a deposit in 2008. What a shame. Inner reflection is a very cruel mirror, especially when you are 82. It shows without any filters that the greatest enemy of my happiness after 50 was not age, not the economic crisis, and not even my current diagnosis. It was myself, with my thirst to be important, my illusion of control over loved ones, and my total inability to simply breathe deeply without asking permission from my own wallet or the neighbor's opinion. I stood at the helm of my life so firmly that I did not notice the ship had long since docked in an empty harbor, and I was still trying to steer the wind. Now, as the evening shadows lengthen across the floor of my living room, I finally feel what is called inner silence. It does not come from success or wealth. It comes only when you finally stop the war with yourself and the world. I look at my hands. They can no longer hold heavy tools or confidently drive on the highway to Chicago, but for the first time in many years, they are relaxed. I am no longer running. I am not trying to remake anyone, not looking for someone to blame for my losses, and not waiting for approving nods from people whose names I barely remember. After 50, life gives us a chance for real transformation, but we often perceive this time as preparation for the finale, cluttering it with junk. We are afraid to seem weak, to lose authority, or to be left without a penny, not noticing that the greatest poverty is a soul without a single bright memory, only reports of completed work. Do not wait for a snapshot from a clinic like the one now lying on my desk to start simply living. Do not wait until the emptiness in the house becomes your only interlocutor to learn to value the voice of a loved one above your own rightness. Be brave enough to be unimportant to the world, but alive to yourself. I told you this not to teach. I am still learning myself every morning. Sometimes it is worth stopping and asking yourself, looking in the mirror, is what you are spending your last golden hours on really worth giving up the peace of your own heart for it? If this conversation touched some strings in you, like and subscribe to this channel. It would please me to know that this old Arnold from Michigan is not speaking into emptiness, and that our conversations will help some of you avoid the mistakes for which I paid such a high price.